My little name tag that says where I'm, my little CQI name tag.
Her boss tag.
You know, the
Trish tag.
the main character.
That's exactly right.
My main character badge.
Well, you are a special one. You know, I think that we're just talking about, when we talk about coffee education and educators in the coffee industry, your name is definitely one of the top names that come up. So for me, it's even more special because when I first started in the coffee industry and I did my Q, you're my instructor.
Okay.
That was in 2009 or 2010. I'm not sure
Oh, a
exactly.
long time ago. Yeah.
Yes. And
Did you take it at the old SCA in Long Beach?
No, I took it at Manet's office in Vermont.
Oh, that's right. In Vermont. That was a while ago.
That was a while ago.
I probably wasn't in
Nick was still like aspiring to be a professional cyclist back then.
Okay, yeah.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe you're still in high school at that time.
Probably high school. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, I never would have thought that I would be here after so long in coffee because I started as a roaster.
Right.
When I was I was in college, I got a job as a barista, as some people do, and that was a long time ago. And I thought to myself, hey, roasting coffee is pretty great. I see these people roasting coffee, and that was before it was a cool thing to do or anyone really knew how to do it, actually. It's a really long time ago. And I thought to myself, the best job in coffee would be just roasting coffee all day.
And back then...
And I thought that was going to be my career.
That's amazing. And back then, how many women were actually roasting coffee, though?
I mean, nobody was really doing coffee at all. So it wasn't... I felt like I didn't know any other roasters besides me and maybe 3 other people. But I found out later that it was more male-dominated, or men-dominated career. But by that time, I didn't have to care about that. I just did my thing and put my head down and just kept on learning about coffee as we do.
Which is great. I think that, but I think you just like literally started something though back then, because I think you were a role model to so many women today that are still roasting, and they're really great roasters.
Yes.
Even in the area they're in the Bay Area, there's so many
women roasters.
They're roasting amazing coffees there. So, but back then, you know, like you said, you're just like focusing on doing your thing.
Right.
You're trying to be the best you could in your craft, and it kind of showed, right?
Well, I always tell women that ask, or even men who ask, like, how do you support women in the coffee business, or how do you fight for women's whatever recognition in the industry? And I say, all you really have to do as a woman is show up and do the job.
Yeah.
You actually don't
Amazing.
have to do anything, because just your mere presence sometimes is disruptive enough that you show up and then someone's like, oh, there's a woman here, when it's used to be like a whole table of men cupping and there's one woman cupping. And just you being there doing it is enough to kind of shake things up a little bit for certain people. So you don't have to do anything. You don't have to come with any agenda. Just show up and do your job, and it's enough. Exactly. It's representation.
You are a human being. Just show up and do your job, do your thing, right?
You don't have to fight. You don't have to fight with anybody. You don't have to have a debate.
Sure.
Just do. If you're a cupper, just cup. If you're a roaster, just roast. You know,
focus on your craft, right?
You're enough by being you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think this is so inspiring too. I think, you know, you went to Europe for a while, right?
Yeah.
And you work. I think you worked.
I lived
there.
in Norway for about almost 4 years.
Ooh, whoa.
And you roasted coffee there.
Yeah, I roasted coffee there, and that was 1999, 2000 or so when I was there.
I was 2 years old.
Oh my God.
Such a baby.
Why did he have to say that?
Yes.
Yeah, that was when, so around that time, what was interesting is that around that time, the Norwegians and the Swedes and like the whole Nordic countries had developed a competition for baristas.
Okay.
And it was the beginning of what is now the WBC.
Amazing.
So when I was there in Norway in 1999 or so, we would show up to a coffee bar, and all of that the preliminary rounds were in someone's coffee bar.
Wow.
And it was just like all these kids around the espresso machine, and kids were just like banging out drinks, and it was very cool and very raw and sort of so brand new, and it was only the Nordic countries doing it. And then SCA at the time thought it was cool and sort of like took it on, and it developed from there. But I was there at the very beginning.
That's
for
amazing.
See it happening.
Very beginning, and now we're here in Athens, World
Right.
of Coffee, and
Look at us
another
now.
year.
right?
Yeah,
Look
literally.
at us now.
How
We
many
have-
years later?
how
More
many-
than 20 years later.
How many people stand we have over here just to watch the barista competition?
Right.
You know,
That's right.
and not only the barista competition, we have the Brewers Cup, and
Brewers
which
Cup.
also you have a part.
Yeah,
on
my
that,
former partner, Nick Cho, developed that. My friend and I, Philip Ackerblom, who's across the way, he and I developed the Roasters competition. So yeah, then it grew from there. The Brewers Cup is the second most popular, and it's just phenomenal to see so many people practicing. And what I always tell people is that these competitions are meant to push the envelope.
Yes.
So you were going to ask me about what my role is at CQI, the Coffee Quality Institute. I work on developing the Q Grader program, so all of the content and working with the instructors that teach it. And the instructors right now are always, and some Q graders will ask me, what are we doing about all of these new flavors in coffee? How are Q graders supposed to handle it?
Yeah.
Anaerobic,
Yes, co-fermented.
yeast, and all of these things. How are we supposed to grade those things? And I say, that's what the competitions are for. You know, the competitions push all these envelopes on
Sure.
purpose.
Sure.
So they do this for us. They try out all these things, whether I hear they're doing strange things with milk.
Yes.
I don't know what that is. They freeze the milk or something like that.
Yeah.
Like everything you could experiment with, the kids are doing, and they're not all kids. I realize they're grown human beings, but
Right.
they're the ones making all of these interesting new and asking for the anaerobics or asking for all these things so that we can sit back and watch it happen and taste it and consider it. But Q graders don't have to worry about it necessarily at this moment. But the competitions do that for the industry. The competitions push all of those boundaries almost to the point of being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because we don't have to sell anything if we're just presenting to judges, right? We just have
Right.
to sell the concept, not the actual thing.
Yeah.
I think it's part of innovation too, right? That's exactly what you're trying to. That was the competitions were meant to be. Is to be innovative too, pushing the envelope, push the boundaries,
Yes.
and we can actually sit back and then be spectators in a sense, as the judges are sitting there and analyzing those drinks or those coffees they're tasting. But we don't need to be uncomfortable about it. Just like you said, I think that we don't talk much about, being uncomfortable or not know something, which is okay,
Yeah.
not to know everything.
That's right.
That's the beauty as well. I think coffee is a young industry still, and
It's a young industry, so
Yes.
you're okay.
yes,
Wow.
Nick,
You're young.
you're
still
gonna
lots
make
to
it. You're
learn.
gonna be all right.
All right.
I mean, how long have you been doing this so far? I mean,
I've been in coffee for 4 years.
okay.
But like I would say my first year or two is not knowing like literally anything. I'm just trying to figure there's I'm just trying to figure it out, honestly. I would say most of my learning came like the past 2 or 3 years though.
Yeah.
And I always told Ricardo this, that like every day working in this industry, the more I realize I don't know anything.
That's right.
The more I realize like I
Well,
feel
that's the
like I
same
get
way I
further
feel.
away from like knowing something,
Yeah.
So and that's what I love about it.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, what you mentioned, I went to Norway for a while. I was already a decade in coffee before I moved there. So I had already been a roaster for like 7-8 years, and I've been in coffee for 10 years. And I got to Norway thinking I knew everything already. So that's when it's dangerous, when you think you knew it, you've seen everything, you know everything.
Yeah.
Because
True.
then someone shows up and takes you to school.
Yep.
And it was Norway. It were the baristas in Norway. It was the attitude that they had. It was their point of view. The Scandinavians have this way, especially the Norwegians, if you'll forgive me. The Norwegians tend to be just very skeptical all the time
Yeah.
of things. But they're very kind people,
Yeah,
and they're
yeah.
open people. But they will just say, well, they're kind of like, you have to prove it to me.
Yes,
kind of people.
Yeah.
And so if you said to them, well, in Italy they have the best cappuccinos in Italy, you might say something like that to them.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world would accept that and say, okay. But the Norwegians were like, oh, really?
No way, huh?
Well,
Show
let me
me.
see if we can do it better. And they did. They sort of like figured out how to do it.
Yeah.
So, that's when you think you know everything, someone will show up and teach you something new.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But I feel like in coffee, for the most part, people are very curious in this industry. People are like always want to learn, always want to share what they learn. So for you, like why is education like a focus for you? Like why is that a core to who you are in the industry? I mean, that's from what I get from the little time I've known you. I feel like that's core to Trish.
Yeah, I don't know if it's something that was bred into me. My mother and to some extent, my family are teachers in a way.
Okay.
We've all sort of gravitated out of being official teachers, but before I was in coffee, I was an artist. I went to school for art.
Okay.
And I was a
Cool.
painter.
Wow.
And so I was painting pictures and even selling them in galleries. So it
Nice.
wasn't like going horribly wrong, but
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
still a struggle as when you're starting
do you
out.
still paint?
A little bit, but not
bit?
very much. So I was painting pictures and selling them. And then I taught at the museum school at San Jose. In San Jose, California, there's a museum, and there used to be a museum school, and I taught there for 7 years. And so education's always been something I love doing. And then at some point, I thought I knew a lot about coffee. So then I decided it's good to share that, right?
Yeah,
It's good to share it in whatever way I knew how. And the Q program was really coming up at that time and so exciting. I think
true.
you'd agree. That was kind of exciting to be
Yes.
involved in it back then. And no one cared about being a Q grader when we were Q graders.
No, it's
It
true.
wasn't cool.
Well, I remember when I actually was talking to Yildi, my friend Yildi Ravi. Hi, Yildi. She's also a great educator, by the way.
She's a dedicated educator.
Amazing.
Yeah, brilliant.
That the amount of dedication and time and passion that she puts in is amazing as well. So
Yes,
we invite her one day to the podcast too.
absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I remember when she talked me into it, and I was scared because I was very young to the industry at that point. I started in coffee in 2008, and I think I did it in 2009 or 2010. Either I can't remember exactly when, but it was right there, maybe 1 or 2 years after I started. And she was telling me, it's like 5 days of like testing. I don't know how many coffees you're gonna taste. There's triangulation. There is like, sweet, sour, and salt, and all of that. I had no idea what we were talking about back then, and I was scared half to death. I'll be honest with you. And then I started like looking into the materials and looking into the program. I said, listen, this is very tough, and if I'm able to pass this, because I remember there was like a really like small percentage of people that actually ended up passing the first time they took it. I said, it can vouch for my ability to actually analyze coffee. And then when it was such a young thing, such a new thing, when people came to me asking about my coffees, I could, with property, talk better, or authority, talk better about my coffees. So I was like, it's going to be tough, but I need to go through it in order for me to get some sort of respect, being such a young coffee professional in the industry back then. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to take the Q so early on, and for you actually being the instructor at that day, at that program. And I learned so much, literally at that time, and to this day, I believe it was one of the best things I did in coffee in terms of education and learning about the product that we love so much that I had no idea existed. Okay. And that made me a better professional back then. I understood when people came and asked me. I had clients calling me, asking for coffees and say, I just want something that tastes like this. And I knew exactly which coffee I could offer them because I could identify, because I had this experience through the Q.
Yeah.
Right?
The thing about the Q is it's not necessarily like we're teaching people how to taste.
Okay.
I feel like people already have pre-selected to be in the industry, so they you sort of know how to taste coffee.
Yeah.
Whether you're a curator or not, you're in coffee, you taste it all the time.
Yeah.
So I feel like people just need the course to sort of compartmentalize to structure their tasting
Sure.
in a way to give them a certain protocol that can help them articulate what they already know, sort of thing.
That
in
that
a
just
way.
helped me right there, yeah. Because I mean,
Sure.
like for me, I obviously know how to cup. I know how to do the whole thing, the protocol. I mean, I'm not a cupper, but I can understand the basics. But for me, it's like I've yet to like learn how to structurally cup coffee. So when I taste coffee, it's like, oh, it tastes like this, and I get this acidity. But when you say like compartmentalize, like in a certain like order and protocol,
Yeah.
it makes sense. Like
It's a bit of a discipline.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a
Yeah.
crash course in a certain kind of discipline.
Yeah.
So that you know how to focus.
yes.
Because otherwise, you taste the coffee, you're like, "Wow, I just love it." You know?
It tastes
I
bomb.
love it. Oh, why do you love it? Because it's good. You can't say that. Yeah, people
wakes you
want
up
to.
in the morning, yeah.
Producers want to know why.
Yeah.
Your importer, your exporter
Yes.
wants to know why you like it.
Yeah. Roasters
so that they
want to
can.
know why.
Roasters want to know why. So that whole question of how you're going to talk about it is what the industry needs.
Sure. I could not agree more. And I think that we're talking about something that I did 13 years ago. The industry has evolved since then.
Yes,
We have seen a lot of different changes
constantly evolving.
all the time, which that's part of like the beauty of our industry as well, the constant change and the constant opportunity to innovate, to really explore things. And how do you think that, might be a tough question, but maybe not. Well, how do you think that the program is still relevant today? We're talking about education, right? We're talking about perhaps the way of communicating quality, the way that we communicate post-harvest processing. And I know you're in charge of that part of the program for the CQI. How do you think that that's still relevant today, taking into account the problems that we face? Because also I think that the problems that we have in our industry, they have evolved as the years went by.
Yes. Yeah.
How do you think that, what the cupping and then the post-harvest processing education that the CQI offers, how do you think that's still relevant to this day? And,
Right.
And what do you see, that's a two question, right? How do you see moving forward the impact, or the positive impact that can have in the industry?
Well, I think for a lot of these things, to be quite honest, how something is relevant is up to the industry to tell us.
Yeah.
And it will always test things, right? So we're testing all the time whether Q is relevant, whether CQI is relevant, whether, ACE, COE is relevant,
Sure.
whether anything is relevant, honestly. And if people show up and show their support for it, they're finding some value in it. So that's very basic. But I would say that on a more specific level for the Q program or these programs of education, how are they relevant? They the trainings are doing that thing, helping people articulate what they need. Is it something that we want to analyze all the time? Yes, because so one thing to know about Q especially is that it evaluates itself. We're constantly like in a self-cleaning mode.
Yeah.
So we always evaluate and we put out new versions. And so
Yep.
we're at version 5.0, which has been a little bit controversial since it was launched in November last year. And then there'll be updates to that. And that is a way for us. For example, when you took the Q,
Sure.
it was 5 days.
Yes.
And there was a Brazil table, and there
Yes.
was a Colombia table.
True.
There was a Central America table, Africa table. Then it changed to 6 days,
Yes.
and now it has no Brazil table, but
When I had to research, I had to do the new version.
the new version.
Yeah, which was amazing as
There's
well.
a whole table of naturals. There didn't
Yes.
used to be a naturals table. That was introduced during
Yeah.
4.0. Then there was the Asia table, and instead of being an East Africa table, it became an Africa table. Instead of being an Indonesia table, it became an Asia table.
That's right.
So these kind of things are changing all the time to keep it as relevant as we can. But is it relevant to everyone all the time? I don't know. It's such a diverse. I look around this show and everyone. It's so diverse and specific.
Yes.
Or it didn't used to be. It used to be like major categories, like espresso machine category of show floor, and there was like the roasters. You know.
Yes.
Now everybody has a different angle on their specific niche, so it's not even. There's no blanket statement for anything anymore.
True.
So it's a really exciting time in that way. If that answers your question, I
think answers it. I think that we also have to respect that, right? Because sometimes we want to be the one to have the final word, or whatever I'm saying is the right thing, and then we forget to respect other people's opinion, right?
Right.
We can't do that. In a sense, we have to respect other people's opinion. Otherwise, this diversity that you're talking about doesn't mean anything. If I'm the final word, if my saying is the final say, then your say doesn't matter at that point. And that doesn't really foster growth,
Right.
diversity, other people's opinion, which actually generates innovation, pushing the envelope, and so on. So I could not agree more with you. I think your answer is very relevant. And I think that as long as an industry, we are all pushing forward for the betterment of coffee,
Yes.
there is no wrong answer.
Yeah.
And what you said about making sure that everybody is heard, to say there are no wrong answers. If there are wrong answers, generally the industry finds those together.
Sure.
You know, we come together and we say, actually, we don't like the flavor of
Charcoal.
over-fermented,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Right, or something, or some kind of defect, right?
Right.
We decided we don't like the coffee to taste like mud. The industry has decided that, right? So these are, you know, you might laugh at that, but those things are even being tested all the time, right?
Well,
the idea of like, well, we don't like, back when we started, we didn't like over-fermented flavors. So now what is over-fermented flavor?
That's right.
What is
Yeah.
that, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
And now we're pushing those envelopes.
That's right.
And it's actually interesting you say that, because like when you talk about like flavors, some of the things that we like in coffee, that we don't like in coffee, we like in wine, for example.
Yes.
Like the charcoal, the bitter. I mean, well, some people like that charcoal bitterness, like big body red wine,
Like
but in
dry.
coffee, it's like
dry
yeah.
in wine.
in coffee, it's like not good.
Yeah, but then there are coffee people who do like that.
That's true.
Yes.
That's
So
true. That's true.
it's you know, it's really interesting also the point of view culturally that we come from.
Excellent.
Very
Yes.
important, because the standard, like we used to have the Colombia table, we used to have the Brazil table, because they were standards for
Yes.
specialty coffee. I don't know anymore. I'm spending so much time in Southeast Asia lately, and I gave a talk at the Philippine Coffee Expo a few weeks ago where I talked about the soft power of Asia coming through,
Wow.
and actually reaching back over and influencing the Western world with what they do. And I'm seeing that more and more. And I was at a dinner last night and we were talking casually, and somebody else mentioned the soft power of Asia in coffee.
Is that
And
a new term you're going to coin?
No, I mean, I don't have to coin soft power of Asia, but I'm here to say that if we're looking at anything, we're looking at the paradigms that we had just thought were true. You know,
Yeah,
we just know that these things are true about coffee. Nothing is true anymore, almost.
true.
And that's why it's so exciting.
Yes.
That's why I decided not to be an artist, to be a coffee person instead of an artist, because coffee was so much more interesting than the art world.
Wow, that's an statement right there. I love art,
Yeah.
but I agree with you. You know, I
It's
never
so
thought
interesting.
it that way.
It's constantly changing,
Exactly.
and for me, because I am still an artist at heart. I feel like when I create something, and I can watch somebody drink it, you know, like it comes from a raw piece, and then it gets roasted, and then it's processed, and becomes a coffee cup, and then I see somebody consume it. That's like the most beautiful art piece that there is. And so that's why it's more interesting to me. But if we see also, just like looking around the show and seeing how people are changing what coffee is, what it looks like, how it's brewed. Every new dang dripper that you see, every new little contraption, the little grinder burr thing. Do you see that? Cosimo had these grinder burrs he was showing me, and I'm like, heck, when is anyone going to rest? No one's resting. It just goes and goes and goes.
No time for sleep.
It's almost hard to keep up with all of it.
Right. Which is why it's great.
Right.
Anyway, did we go on a tangent? Was that answering your question?
No, that's
No, that's
awesome. I think we're having just like a friends conversation here.
Yeah.
I love the soft power of Asia. I think that we have seen it throughout the years, more and more Asian countries making a statement very softly.
Yeah.
I think in terms of producing coffee as well, in terms of the competitions, the Japanese and Indonesians,
Right.
Chinese people are really making a statement when it comes to the competition, and again in a soft, kind way.
Yeah.
And I think we have so much to learn from that.
Yeah, it's almost like when we started this conversation, I said, essentially, women, all they have to do is show up. Anybody just has to show up. Asia's just showing up and being themselves. And they don't have to worry about what the Western world thinks about their coffee anymore because they're buying their own coffee.
Yes,
exactly right.
They have enough buying
true.
power themselves to make any kind of flavors they want and not worry about being rejected from, if I'm from California and I'm used to Central American coffees, I love Guatemalan coffees.
Yeah.
I love my Guatemalan coffee.
Sure.
Because that's kind of how I cut my teeth in coffee. I learned from Central America, kind of, and some African flavors. So do the Indonesians have to worry that I don't like their coffee? Or my customers don't like that? I do, by the way. I love Indonesian coffee. But, this has been one of those conversations. What if people don't like my flavors from my country, or my region? Asia's fine to buy all their own coffee. And they enjoy, you know what I mean? So the buying is different because there's such a powerhouse of buying power in Asia, so it's a soft power, but it's also a huge buying.
No, look
specifically
at the
a
demographics.
buying
How many people
power.
are in Asia? It's a huge amount of people.
And China has more Q graders now than anywhere else.
Wow. Used to be South Korea.
It used to be South Korea.
Wow.
And Colombia was before that. Ethiopia, Colombia, those sort of made sense. And when the whole program started, it sort of made sense it would be Colombia and Ethiopia because CQI had projects there and we were developing those things. Now, it was Korea, now it's China. All of Southeast Asia, so people are very interested in analyzing coffee there.
It's such a beautiful market too, I think, and one of the things that I think when I hear about demographics, the amount of people in Asia, they are just scratching the surface as well.
Yeah.
When they really acquire a bigger taste, not better, but a bigger taste for coffee, we're going to see some really impactful consumption globally because it's technically still like mostly a tea culture.
Yeah.
They don't have a morning coffee culture like the Western world. We wake up with coffee.
Right.
It's like a grab and go.
They don't open their
It's almost
shops.
like cultural.
Their shops don't open till just before lunch.
Wow.
Oh, interesting.
I was teaching a long time ago. I was teaching one of my first Q courses I taught was in Taiwan, and when I was teaching in Asia, and I woke up and I'd be in class, and then my host, "Oh, you want coffee, right?" I'm like, "Yes, I want coffee to start." I was like looking around the lab. Are we gonna get coffee? He's like, "Oh, I forgot. You people want coffee in the morning." I said, "Yes, that's what we do." So it's really funny the whole. The way the culture impacts how people consume, how they're buying, how they're engaging with coffee. It's totally different.
Right.
And that brings me to kind of one, I guess, final question that I have. And I want to hear from you is, obviously, I think every market in the world we're all at different stages. Here in the U.S. and Europe and Asia, we're at different stages. But when you coined the term, why did you coin the term third wave coffee? Where are we at now, and where are we going? But also want a disclaimer that, I get that's probably hard to maybe answer because different markets around the world are at different stages of their development or their growth. Like we were just talking about, Asia's at barely scratching the surface. Where the U.S., for example, is a really developed market.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard to know what's more developed. Europe or America with specialty coffee. I mean, specialty coffee is interesting. Though the term third wave comes from third wave is a term used in a lot of different things. They use it in business. It's used in feminism.
Yes.
There's a whole 3 waves of feminism, and I was reading about all of that. By the way, third wave coffee is like a 20-year-old term.
Exactly right.
It's been 20 years now.
Yes.
So
wow.
It's pretty fun to watch how that developed. But yeah, it was 2003 that I wrote an article that went into the Flamekeeper, which was the Roasters Guild
Yes, I
newsletter,
remember that.
and it
Okay.
was about being in Norway. It was about living in Norway and watching how they engaged with coffee there in a way that I had never seen before. Coming from a place I thought I knew everything, right? So I talked about third wave in this with the idea that you don't have to do what everyone's done before.
Okay.
You can create a different idea about something, and that's kind of loosely a very loose way to talk about what third wave feminism was, which was you could be anything you want to be as a woman. You can be a mom, you could be a
Right.
lawyer, you could be anything and still be a
farmer.
feminist.
Yeah.
You could be a farmer, you could be
Yeah.
anything, right? So that's the idea was third wave coffee. You could be anything you wanted in coffee so long as you brought quality with it or tried to take it to another level. And that's a kind of a loose way to put it. But there's a lot more things that came with it. Some people relate it to the way we started to roast coffee lighter.
Yeah.
Some people say that it was how we were showing the coffee across the bar, how we were elevating the experience, how everything started to look cleaner and more professional. And then it was supposed to come with more recognition of the producer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that happened.
I think it's happening.
Sometimes.
Perhaps
talk
not.
a lot about
I think,
it, yeah.
I think
Yeah,
the
not
industry's
as
more
fast.
conscious about it.
Not as fast. Not
Yeah.
as fast as we want
Okay.
to see, but
Yeah,
it's happening
yeah.
for sure.
The one thing I talk about with third wave that I've noticed after 20 years kind of watching everything happen is that what third wave did was, and this is actually a parallel with third wave feminism, you can be anything you want for yourself, and to be yourself is to be the change.
Wow.
And,
I love that.
and that can be
Yes.
true, but it could also not be true.
Exactly.
So when we look at things like, if you buy a very, very special coffee from a very special producer, a very small lot, it's like 5 bags, and you get it airlifted home to you as a roaster, right? And it's like the highest, most premium thing. Are you actually making change in that growing community? Maybe you're just giving that one producer a little shot in the arm with a little bit extra premium.
True.
Yeah.
But have you lifted the whole community? Is everybody selling for more?
Exactly.
Or is it just that tiny little tip of the iceberg that's selling for more? That guy's 5 bags that you took and you put airlifted back because you're special,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
you're gonna sell that for 125 gram bag at $50, 125 grams, and you're going to only do pour overs, and you're going to sell tickets to do that pour
Keep
over on a
going,
certain.
please. I love
So okay, good for you.
Uh,
You're doing you. That's awesome. But did you lift the whole community?
wow.
Are you making change for the producers? Or did you just give a shot in the arm to that one guy who had to separate, by the way, to get that coffee for
Right.
you? And now does he have a whole bunch of other coffee he can't really move? These are questions a third wave had to ask ourselves.
Which they're still relevant questions 20 years later, right?
Yeah.
I'm listening to this, I'm like, wow, third wave coffee is incredibly relevant to today. I love it. I think there are some producer groups in some other countries, like Panama, for example. Panama, they figured out a way to work together, all the
Yeah.
producers, and they came together beautifully, and they have an amazing program. But how can other countries or other producer groups learn perhaps from Panama, for example, and do their own thing, right?
Right.
We see it happening. I see producer being more recognized, but like I said, I don't think I see it happening in the as fast as we want to see.
Yeah.
And I think that you hit the nail on the head by saying, if you're doing that with one small lot from that producer that produces 100 bags, but you're buying 10, there's 90% left of that coffee with that producer. How much is going to give for that?
Right.
But your purchasing decision of buying that one specific lot that was airlifted, is it going to impact the 90% left on his warehouse, on his bodega,
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really real question. And I think that's one of the things that we do at Ally is actually analyzing the whole picture and not just the one specific niche, micro lot, special, super special coffee. We see the whole thing as a whole, because how can I create real impact if I'm only looking at 2, 3, 4, 5%
Yeah.
of somebody's production?
If you have blinders on
Right.
and you're only seeing your little special thing that you're doing, The special thing is great. Don't
Right.
get me wrong. I'm all about the special thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it pushes the envelope, like we we're talking
Yeah,
before.
absolutely.
Yes.
But if we're ignoring whole areas that we should be focusing on, that we should be concerned about, that's when it's a problem.
I agree. I think that we talked about this all the time. I think for me, every coffee has a value and every coffee has a home. Are we, as a whole industry, looking at those coffees properly and awarding properly for what they are? That's the biggest question I think that we need to answer. But not saying you need to answer, but as an industry, we need to answer.
Right.
Are we doing the best we can, taking the whole picture in consideration, right?
Right.
I don't know. I think we need to continue to develop that thought. But I think we need to ask that question ourselves. Every coffee has a home. Every producer has a value. Every coffee has a value. Are we valuing them properly?
Right.
I like it. I like that. I think if I keep asking questions, we're going to be here all day.
Yeah.
Well, it's like
Obviously, I can talk all day. I love to talk.
I love talking too. So yesterday I got back home after the show, and my throat was a little sore because I was talking too much. And then I was like, okay, I know. I need to actually tone it down a little bit. But
Well, all this talk about coffee does make me want to go out there and try some coffee.
Yes.
So maybe that's what we should do.
well, we are
Absolutely.
here. We're here at the World of Coffee. How many times a year do we get a chance to be at the World of Coffee? Once, right?
Yeah.
So, Trish, thank you so much.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having me.
It means a lot to have you here
Ricardo.
in this podcast. We're working towards something and talking about problems. You know, Nick does podcasts all the time. And I always wanted to have a podcast that we talk about problems and how we can actually present solutions. You've been a great, inspiring figure in the industry. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and being here and talking so much. I've learned so much just by sitting here and talking to you today. And I know you, I've known you for a while, so thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Ricardo.
you.
Thanks, you guys.